At this time, I want to go straight into the panel, the representative for the expert panel, to speak to the issue of the reports. As you're aware, we have received the Carty report and the Carver report. We have sought to email it out so persons can read. It is no secret. It is no secret. It is the public, it's a public health concern, and it affects all of us. And that is why we have taken that decision to provide it. I want to thank them for their service and to turn at this time to Dr. Carty to speak to the issues to which we are concerned.
Thank you very much, Mr. Collins. Good afternoon, everybody. And I must say at the outset that I should not be here later than about 6:30. So if you see me get up and leave, it's because I do have another pressing engagement that I need to attend to. And so, in the interest of the limited time I have, therefore, I would want to speak mainly to the Carty report. I'm sure most of you, if not all, have read both reports, and you would recognize that this one is the more comprehensive of the two. In the first report, they made quite a number of recommendations, and so on the second visit, they were not here, you would note, for purposes of testing, but they were simply here on their second visit for evaluation purposes. And if you were to examine their report on page 39, you would notice that they are indicating that a number of major renovation works took place. I wouldn't go into listing them because I believe, well, should I list them? No. So most of you would have that list. But even as I perused the list, I was forced from a scientific point of view to raise some questions. And one of the first questions I would have wanted to ask is, if everything was done that should have been done with those surfaces before they were painted. And this is important because you would note that the main problems were fungi, bacteria, and the list of different kinds of fungi is not this long, but about that long. And so we are not quite certain what the conditions would have been when the walls were painted and how long this mold could live under that condition and what could happen, because spores do have a fairly long dormant period. All they need are the right environments, and those spores would germinate and begin to proliferate again. And so we know that over time, paint deteriorates, and in time, as the paint deteriorates and as conditions return to what they might have been before the painting took place, then we could have a repeat of the problem we're having now. So that is one of the first questions I was forced to ask myself. And I saw somewhat of an answer to that problem because there was a statement in the report that said that we observed that best practices were not always observed during the time the renovations were being done. That's a very important statement because it suggests to me that maybe those individuals who were charged with the responsibility of doing the renovations may not have been advised as to what conditions could exist in the future and what preventive measures should be taken today. So it's not just a matter of washing a wall and repainting it, because the report also found that even though renovations were done, there were cracks in the walls. And so if there are cracks in the walls, then there is a possibility that fungi, mold, bacteria might still be existing in the environment. And the question is, to what extent and what further damage could be done as these, in the right conditions, begin to proliferate. And let's remind ourselves that we are now at a time of the year when the conditions would be just right. Because we are entering our wet season, not entering, we are just about in our wet season. And so as the hurricanes come, as the humidity increases, we can just be setting the stage for a repeat of that those same conditions. So that was one of my main concerns, the very high fungal count and the possibility that based on what the current report is suggesting, that those conditions might still be rife for problems. There's another concern I have personally, and that concern is with the chemistry lab. Because again, while the Carty report says that renovations were done in the lab, even to the tiling of the floor, when one looks below the floor, one recognizes a very, very, very serious problem. Because under the chemistry lab's floor, we still have the same condition that existed before the renovations were done. And my question is, didn't somebody see that? And somebody saw it because the recommendation was made in the initial report that be fixed. Somewhere along the line, the ball was dropped, and so as far as I'm concerned, it would be necessary to go revisit that. Not simply because of the infestation of cockroaches, which is bad enough, but for the problem of the bad drainage system under that lab, especially since lots of chemicals would have been flowing under there over the past 50-something, 60-something years, as the case might be. So that it is not just a problem which developed today. I am a senior citizen today, and I sat in those same labs as a student, you see. And so my concern is with the fact that that chemistry lab's underground is still the same as it was before. Then there's another concern I have. You would remember that in the report, containers of chemicals were identified, some open, some with agar covers and so on. And at the time of this current report, we are told that a very large drum, something like 55 gallons, was still on the school compound with chemicals in it. Now, that is a major cause of concern. In fact, while the report suggested that the various levels of all of the different compounds that they listed were within satisfactory standards, one has to ask a very important question. While carbon dioxide concentration might be here and not up there, while oxygen or nitrogen dioxide or whatever other compounds were examined, while the standards might be here, what happens when all of these chemicals are exposed in the atmosphere and they come together? What happens? I did not see anything in the report that suggested that an investigation to be done to find the effects of all of these chemicals coming together and what could happen to individuals. Now, there has been a lot of talk about, and please, I'm not politicizing, I'm not on a talk show, but I'm a citizen and I listen and I hear. And I hear people making a lot of noise about no conclusive causes. I'm sure you would have heard statements to that effect. But you would note that there was a very important statement in the report that indicated that fungi and molds do cause, or no, the word they used was may, may cause, so let's use the word they use, these same symptoms which were presented. And so one then has to beg the question, and I do have experience with mold. I remember it was about 2 years ago, right in my office. I was experiencing some of those symptoms, the itching, the dry cough, and I knew that I was not ill. In fact, over years I've been focusing on building my immune system and just staying well. My doctor begs me to come and visit him once a year, just so that he could make sure that all is well. But about 2 years ago, I was recognizing these things happening to me. And I couldn't think of anything that could be causing it other than the environment in which I was spending most of my time. And so I began observing around my office, and I noticed there was mold in areas that had some degree of moisture. So what did I do? I went to TDC, bought myself some mold guard, cleaned up my office. But having cleaned up the mold, I then applied the mold guard to it. Now what that mold guard does is it prevents the growth of mold and fungi. That's what it does, prevents. Sometime later, I had cause to recommend it to somebody, went back to TDC to search for it and couldn't find it. And then they told me they had bought in just that one supply. I couldn't understand why only that one supply, so I had to resort to going online looking for it. What is the point I'm making here? The point I'm making is this. I did not see in the report a recommendation that said, although there were indications that one should do housekeeping and so on, I did not see something that specifically said that some kind of preventive chemicals, such as mold guard, be applied to all of those areas, even before the renovation is done. I think that that is critical, because we do not want to be re-exposing individuals to the same conditions that would have caused the problems in the first place. As far as I'm concerned, as a naturopath, the old people used to say prevention is better than cure. But as naturopaths, we believe that prevention is indeed the cure. We could not prevent the first round, but we must find ways and means of preventing second round. Exactly. Now, there is another cause for concern. I have not been able, I did not make it a point to go to the school. I remember in one of our meetings I asked whether it was accessible, and the indication was that, we're not quite sure, but people go. But I never, went after the school was closed down. But in this report, I'm recognizing that things like books and tables and stools and all of those things that had mold in them was still on the compound. So my question is, did these individuals who were doing the work have an understanding of what mold is, what fungi are, and how easy it is for them to grow once they find the right conditions? And so that's a cause for concern for me. And I'll tell you why it is a cause for concern. Because even as this report is now saying, it is important to get rid of these things. Remember, students were inhabiting that school before they went to the Washington Archibald High School. Those children had bags and books and clothes and so forth, and stuff could travel. And I'm not trying to raise any alarm, but I'm speaking about the reality of the situation in which we live. Because between the pages of these books, moles could stay. And all somebody has to do is to forget a book at the new environment, gets wet, gets moldy, and you see the process begin over again. And so, I had to ask myself, what measures were put in place to ensure that cross-contamination did not happen? You might be saying to yourself, well, Dr. Carty is simply asking questions, but believe you me, it might be better to raise the questions now and then try and find the solutions or the answers to those questions instead of waiting until the end to raise the questions. Another very, very fundamental issue I have, and I believe that this is dear to me because of the kind of work I do. Most people know me as a funeral director, but my passion really is in teaching people how to live well. I'm a naturopath, okay? And so one of my main concerns was, what advice are parents, teachers, and students being given as relates to the integrity of their immune system? You will note in the report more than once statements to the effect that many of the moles and fungus and so on may not affect healthy people. But then those persons who are immunocompressed, that is, those people whose immune systems are challenged, would be the ones more easily affected. So that one should not argue that, oh, it has to be something else because it's not affecting this person, but it's affecting that person. It simply means that person A might have a very strong immune system, and your immune system is your first line of defense against any kind of pathogens. And that is one of the reasons why, if you were to visit my website, the first thing you would see on there is a free book on the immune system that I wrote long before this thing occurred. When I decided to go into that business, I thought one of the main things people need to do is to work on their immune systems. And so I wrote that book and put it out there for free. It just gives you an understanding of what the immune system is and how it operates, so that you can be aware, so that you could be educated, so that you can be able to take responsibility for your own health. But the point I'm making here is that especially for those individuals who have been affected, some kind of measure needs to be taken to help them to boost their immune system. And the same applies to those persons who have not been affected. I'm just looking at some notes I made here just to make sure I did not leave anything out, and it looks like I have covered most of the main things, except for one thing. The report suggested that some remediation work was done with the sewage system. But the observation is that many of the old pipes that were put down there in the 50s, yes, the school was built somewhere thereabouts, right? Yep, in the late 50s, I think. And there are lots of old pipes that are still down there. And in fact, the report suggested that cracks in these pipes could cause the emission of odors, bacteria, the sulfides and so on, that would cause problems. And so one of the measures that they're asking that is put in place now is that all of those underlying pipes, underground pipes, are be condemned. I thought that would have been understood when the first report was given, so that we cannot afford to do patchwork in this situation. Because once you patch an old garment, guess what? It's gonna rip again. It's gonna rip again. You see. And so it is important, therefore, that someone is asked to go and revisit that whole underground system, because we could have a repeat of the soil contamination that we had, and the problems goes over and over again. We do not want to have a recurrence of the problem. We want to fix it once and for all. We love our children, we love our parents, we love our teachers. In fact, I love this country so much that when as a young teacher, I had the opportunity to go to another island and work for US dollars. I said to my young wife at that time, who was kind of looking for us to do a little bit better, that this country made me, and I will stay in this country and work for it. I taught here for 42 years. That's how long I taught in this country, 42 years, until just 2 years ago. And I'm still desiring to teach, only that I'm teaching people now how to take care of their health. So this is important to me. It's personal, you see. And any one of those children could have been mine, because both of my children went to that school. So, that's the reason I'm here, for nothing more than to ensure that our children get the best of what we have to offer them. Thank you very much.